So, hello, my name is Dean, and welcome to those people who are attending in person, and hello to anybody who's watching this on the webinar series. I'm a mental health nurse lecturer here at Swansea University, and I've been asked to deliver a sort of a presentation to you about research. The title is Autobiographical Research, the use of self as an accessible form of inquiry, which is a bit long-winded. Really what we're talking about is insider research, so research which uses me as a participant within the study, and I'm going to explain that all to you. I understand that you're all interested in postgraduate research, so hopefully this will be interesting. And here we go. So I'm going to define a couple of types of insider research. One is called autoethnography, and the other is called Heuristic Inquiry. I know the trouble with methodologies or research approaches is that they have all these different names, but I will try and explain what they mean as we go along, so hopefully you have a good understanding of them. Oops, my slides are moving ahead of me. So the other thing I'm going to do is explain to you some of the methods involved, so how I have gone about this kind of research and how other people might do it too, and I'll use some examples of my own work as well to sort of try and bring it alive. Now, why this kind of research or autobiographical research? Well, I'm a nurse by background, and I'm very focused upon clinical work and helping people. And I was really interested in carrying out research that didn't have too many obstacles in the way of me actually achieving it. And of course, research that involves me and my lived experience and the kind of things that I'm involved in or interested in, that was far more accessible and didn't require very much money compared to many of the other options available to me or that I might have been involved in since. So the reason I like it is because I think that if I was going to explain to a fairly somebody who's really interested and excited in research, but was also working some strategies and some ideas about how to carry out research, then this is one of the ways I would suggest to them because it's so accessible. Here's a definition of insider research. What it means is that I am not joining a group of people to research them. I'm carrying out research within my own group. So I'm living the experience that I'm researching, and not just artificially for the study. I'd be living it anyway. So I'm capturing the kind of stuff that I'm doing naturally and as part of my normal role. And with that comes a position, a stance that I am taking on the world, a philosophical position, an understanding about what I mean by truth or knowledge. And actually, the current sort of COVID-19 crisis is a great example of that, because there are lots of people carrying out some really important and worthwhile research at the moment that is absolutely focused upon finding out a hard fact. Is this vaccine effective or not? That's basically what they want to know, isn't it? And so they're carrying out research to establish that. Now, that fits with a certain position on research, and that's where we're striving for this one truth, this one way of making sense of something. But what we've seen with the vaccine is, although people are striving for that and they're doing very rigorous studies which are experimental, designed to establish if something's effective or not, but the way it's interpreted by human beings, by regulatory bodies, by governments, by countries is different. And you'll notice that not every vaccine has been approved in exactly the same way in every country, which gives us a clue that maybe truth is more than just a fact. Maybe it involves human beings. And if that's the case, then we are probably talking about many truths. Lots of different ways of making sense of things and interpreting the world. And if we have many truths, then it's possible that we can have our truth. So the group that I, as an insider researcher, might be in, might have their truth, their way of making sense of the world and seeing things and perspectives. And of course, if we have our truth, then that means we can have my truth. And my truth may be valid. My truth may be as authentic, as valid as the whole group's truth, as the many truths. And that's where autobiographical research comes in. And of course, the other thing about my truth is that it's not set in stone. As I evolve in life and grow and age and have different life experiences and learn different things and discover different things, my views and perspectives will be informed by those experiences. And so my truth is temporal. It is going to adjust and flow and evolve in life with me. So it's worth bearing that in mind, this idea that facts and knowledge may not necessarily be this sort of one truth that we hold, that there might be many of them, that our group, the group that I'm part of, might have a way of making sense of things, I may, and that's going to change with time. And that means the sort of questions that I may ask are going to change too. And that depends upon what I'm trying to understand. And autobiographical research has a certain kind of question it asks. Now, research typically has some distance between us and those that we're researching. How do they experience? How effective is this for them? Etc. are the kinds of questions that we might normally ask within research. But this kind of autobiographical research that I'm talking about might have questions like, how do we experience the world? Or how do I understand our experience? Or even, how do I experience something? And it's actually these last two that I'm really going to introduce you to. Research methods, autobiographical methods that answer those kinds of questions, that are informed by this belief that really all I'm understanding is my sense of reality, my sense of what I think is happening in the world. And all I can really say is how I understand our experience, or how I experience something. So questions that ask that will be autobiographical questions. And the first of those methods, first of those approaches I'm going to introduce you to is called Heuristic Inquiry. And there are some really cool books and journal articles about it that you can access through Swansea University Library when you arrive. But the seminal text is the Mustaker's text from 1990, Heuristic Research, without a doubt. And what you'll notice at the top is that Heuristic Inquiry is what I call an n=1+ study. Now, n=1 is a number of, n means a number of participants. And often in, say, for example, the vaccine trials, n would equal many thousands of people to make it easier for them to establish this one truth. Within qualitative research, n is often far, far fewer, 30, 15, 12, 6 people. But n=1 is a little bit rarer. And Heuristic Inquiry allows for n=1 plus, which is one person and people within your group as an insider researcher who might share a very similar experience to what you're having. And then there's a process to follow. And that process is described here as engagement, as immersion, as incubation, as illumination, explication, and creative synthesis, which are all words that you're not going to see written anywhere else for any other kind of research approach. They're very specific and very unique to heuristic inquiry. And it's hard to remember what they all mean, to be honest, at times. But I will explain them to you. So here is a slide which has some of my research in it. And so this is a table that comes from a study I did. And I'm describing what those different terms mean. Oops. You will notice that initial engagement is about me as the researcher starting to connect with the area that I'm interested in. So really starting to engage with it, not just living it, which I would be naturally doing, but taking another step to really connect with that lived experience. And then as that progresses, I might work hard to develop an even deeper understanding of the phenomenon of interest. And a way that I might do that is to speak to other people within my group who are sharing that experience, to help me reflect upon it and think about it more deeply and understand it better. Then, after I've engaged and I've immersed, what heuristic inquiry encourages is a step back. So some distancing to move away from trying to really understand it and just live. After which, there's an opportunity to re-engage and become increasingly aware of what this all means, of what I've understood and learned from other people, some of the themes that keep popping up, the bigger picture. And as that goes on, I might become even more aware and have a much stronger awareness of what this lived experience means. And at that point, there's this fantastic opportunity to share that with other people and to share that in what's called a creative synthesis. And a creative synthesis is exactly that. It's synthesizing, pulling together all that information, all that understanding, all that lived experience, but then trying to provide it and offer it to other people in a way that evokes emotion and feeling so they can get a sense of it. Now, how did I do that? Well, I engaged initially with this subject area, which was career transition from being in the armed forces, which is my background, to becoming a civilian and a change of identity, to becoming a veteran. So during that process of leaving the armed forces and starting work in a civilian job, I kept a diary. I recorded my experiences. I also wrote reflective stories about some of the stuff which I wasn't in my diary, some of the stuff that happened before I was leaving, that maybe led to me leaving, so that I could have that information and really engage with it. After I'd done that, I looked at the themes that was coming out of my work, and I used those to begin to understand other people's lived experience. I talked to some people who'd shared what I was going through, and I looked at the themes within their work and what they had said. So I had engaged and I had immersed, and I then stepped back and I just lived my life. I worked, I had my family, I adjusted from being in the armed forces to being a civilian, and I just did that for a while. And then I came back to it. I read through my analysis. I thought about what had naturally happened whilst I was in that incubation stage and how I was making sense of things now. And I hovered above it, I helicoptered above it, and I thought about, what kind of experiences may people have had, and how can I encapsulate that in these what I call typologies, and where do I sit within those? Which one am I, or which ones do I sit within the easiest? And finally, at that point, I created my creative synthesis. I revised my themes, thought about what messages need to be heard moving forward, and I wrote a story as well, and included all of that in my explanation of what it meant to me, what I come to understand about transition from military to civilian employment. That's what I did. Now here's another approach, autoethnography. And the difference between this and heuristic inquiry is, tenuous in some ways, but the easiest way to make the difference is the other one was n equals 1 plus, and this one is very much more n equals 1, so me. In an autoethnography, I'm writing about my experience. And it's temporal, as I said, so that's back to this idea that it will change with time. And it's around this question: how do I experience the world? It's reflexive, so I have to be in it, and I have to share that really in my mind. That's my approach, certainly. In qualitative research, the researcher is connected to the research, but very often you don't really see the researcher within the published work. You just don't see them. In this kind of work, you do see the researcher, and in the work I showed you previously, in my example, you very much see me within it, and that's purposeful, and it's done for a reason. It's so that you can understand where I'm coming from. And again, the idea is to evoke emotion, the felt sense of my lived experience. So it has this evocative component to it, this creativity. So you can see some real similarities already between autoethnography and heuristic inquiry. And it's that reflexivity that I'd hold on to too, actually. Now, how does that look? Well, here's an example from my work. And this is about psychiatric liaison. So it was within a combat environment in the armed forces. I was in a job which only 2 or 3 people would ever do at one time, and I knew that people would come after me and people would come before me. I'd done the job before, but I knew that there wasn't very much information out there telling me how to do it or what it was like, and there wasn't very much research about it. So I carried out this study. I could only do it as an insider researcher. It would have been impossible to do it any other way, because I would have never got permission to go there and carry out the study. I was able to do it temporally in the lived moment, in a way which couldn't possibly be done by another researcher. But the thing is that when I produced my findings, I really did bring myself into the study. So you will notice that the 3 things that I connected together were my professional role as a nurse, so as a mental health nurse, was my professional role in the armed forces, so being a serving member of the military in a combat zone. And then this final point, the point which you often don't see even in qualitative research, I brought me into it. So there's something about me that shaped and informed the way that I approached psychiatric liaison. I apologize for my slides. I think there's a timer on or something, so I'll have to keep on bouncing it back. Here we go. That shaped the way I carried out psychiatric liaison, and I shared that with the reader so they could understand me, and that way they could understand how I interpreted, how I did my job of psychiatric liaison, but they could also understand how I was interpreting all of this and presenting my findings within this paper. That's reflexivity. Now, both of the approaches require data collection and data analysis. I've talked about recruitment really because it's me and it's people that I know. So within my group, if you like, depending on which approach. But data collection, they actually share these methods here that I've got. And the big one that I've used a lot is diaries. I think they're very useful because they capture the moment in time, the hot thoughts, feelings, physical sensations. It's all there in a way which really doesn't quite happen in an interview 6 months later. So it's really alive and dynamic. Stories, nice and reflective. Conversations just with people in passing, people I meet, people I encounter. Reflections are my reflections upon the experience, and they can form part of the diaries. I'm observing the situation and noticing it. I might interview people and ask for their feelings, beliefs, thoughts, meanings, and use that to inform and shape my understanding of the phenomenon. So those are the kind of data collection approaches that we can use, but you will notice that a number of those don't necessarily require other people. Though we're interacting with our world in terms of the study and participants, it can be n equals 1, it can be me. And that makes this a very accessible methodology, these autobiographical methodologies, because I have lots of control over that, but I'm also able to create something from a really different, really individual point of view. And data analysis is the way I like to approach it. Is I like the idea of themes. Themes take this thick, rich data and it boils it down enough that we can helicopter above it and get a sense of things, without making it so reduced that it's just a set of numbers or something. So themes I find really helpful, but it's a nice approach to try and understand the themes that are coming out of my own diaries, etc., or my conversations with other people. Data analysis and these approaches needs to be reflexive. It needs to include me. I need to make myself seen so that you can see where I'm coming from, so that you can understand better how I've analysed this information and where my findings are coming from. Without that, I would argue you don't really know how I'm interpreting things. Now, in my heuristic inquiry, I went so far as to take my data, my diaries, thematically analyze them and present those themes and say, these are the themes that I'm now going to use to make sense of other people's experiences. So I was absolutely upfront about my values, my judgments, and where I was coming from. So you could see that journey all the way through to my creative synthesis at the end, where I pulled it all together. Reflexivity, really, really interesting. The other thing which I like is this thing called member checking or respondent validation. Now, respondent validation is where if I record an interview with somebody, I send them the transcript once I've transcribed it, and I say, is this what you meant? Can you check it? Make sure that you're happy with it. It's what you meant to say. And that gives the person the opportunity to say, yes, that is what I meant, or no, it is, but I won't change this bit for me, please. This is what I mean now on reflection. And I think that offers an extra degree of sort of trustworthiness, if you like, and believability in my findings, because I've checked it out with them. Now, actually, I went a step further and shared my themes and which parts of what they said to me I was going to use as examples in those themes, and check that out too. So that's a way of trustworthiness, authenticity, validity in the findings, if you like. So you can see where it's all coming from. And finally, we get to report those findings. Lots of different approaches to that. I like published journal articles because they're preserved. They're sat there then, and they can be found. But there are lots of other ways too, much more creative ways than that. Stories, poems, pictures, film, using the web, using YouTube, whatever. There is lots of flexibility to be really creative in how we share what we discover in a way that the other people, the readers, the people who are interested, can connect with it and engage with it. And that's the key thing, engagement. Now, like all research, autobiographical approaches have strengths and they have limitations. I would argue a strength for a researcher is that there is an N=1 study. So it involves me as the researcher. I'm accessible to me. I don't have to worry about that. That's achieved. And you can access you, of course, as well. But arguably, I offer, as the researcher, as an insider researcher, I offer a unique perspective, one that is not going to be captured if I don't choose to capture it in this way. I offer a lived experience. It might be for something like I described in a combat zone where only a couple of people are doing it at a time. You couldn't possibly capture that lived experience unless you did what I did. It might be something which other people go through more regularly, like leaving the armed forces. And again, but still, it's a unique opportunity to capture that experience in a different way, hot, live in the moment, with diaries, etc. Really immersed and engaged with it in a way which I wouldn't necessarily do if I was just interviewing other people. But where that is a strength, it is also a limitation. So N=1, so these really low numbers has its disadvantages too. Of course, the results aren't generalizable to a wider population. I'm not representative of an entire population of people, but then qualitative research doesn't pretend to sort of aim for that necessarily, not in the same way as quantitative research might hope to. But we can ask the question, how transferable are my findings really to other people? Now, remember my autoethnography where I said that actually people would come along afterwards and want to understand how to do that job? I would argue my findings are transferable to them at the very least. And likewise, from the Heuristic Inquiry I shared with you, there are 150,000 healthcare professionals leaving the armed forces and now veterans. So I would argue that I'm one of those. My experience is as valid and as authentic as anyone else's, as are the people I talk to. So yes, the findings are transferable to them too. We can make a case for that, but we do have to think about it in this kind of approach. It's very subjective. It's certainly not replicable. You could replicate the methods, but you won't have the same findings. And the reason you won't, not exactly, is because, of course, this is informed by my perspective, my lived experience. And if you were to repeat it, yours would be slightly different. So there would be maybe some things which we had in common, but there would certainly be plenty of things that were different too. And I kind of think that's cool, but you may not. And finally, there's an ethics component. There's an ethical component to using me in research and people who I might be connected to in some way as an insider researcher. So as an insider researcher connected to people, I need to be very mindful that people understand that this is voluntary, that this isn't a commitment they're obliged to take, that it won't have any impact in any other way, but I have to be careful about what impact it might have, of course, relationships, etc. And with me, I am disclosing information about myself that wouldn't necessarily get disclosed in research normally. And if you read my work, you'll see that. Information that helps the reader, the other person, to understand where I'm coming from, because I'm showing me within my research. I'm making myself visible, whereas normally I would be invisible. So I have to bear in mind the ethics of that, of course, and be mindful of it. Now, just to finish off, as I've said, that this is an accessible forms of inquiry. I think they reduce barriers for nurses and other people who want to get involved in research, because it involves an environment that I understand, that I can make use of, that I can access, and often in a way which other people can't. So a unique perspective, but that is also grounded in real experiences. My experience is valid, it's authentic, as is yours. And this final point here is that actually, if I produce information that is transferable to one person, it touches one other person, then it may be that that is enough of an impact. And there's this parable here, isn't there, or about the lion and the mouse. And it's about investing, isn't it, in the future. We invest in people. Now, I have been over the years rehashed this this saying, and the way I describe it, which doesn't really make any sense, but it does to me, and I'll share it. My view is, and what I've learned over the years is always be kind and generous to the mouse, because you never know when they're going to grow into a lion. Now, that isn't exactly what this says here, but it's the same sort of sense of things. And what I really mean is if my research touches one person and informs in some small way how they make sense of nursing or research or the world, who knows? I can't possibly predict how that's going to shape the world in the future, what they're going to be doing, what their role is going to be, their influence upon research. I just can't predict any of that. So touching that one person, I would argue, is enough of an impact, though often these things touch more than one people. And that's it. That's my presentation. I will stop sharing my screen now and pass back to Emma.
Thank you so much, Dean. Fascinating. We've got some time for questions for those joining us live, but I'm just going to end the recording. So just to remind those that are watching this on record, then if you do have questions, please do get in touch with us. And the email address to use is study@swansea.ac.uk.